They said I do not belong here, because I am in a wheelchair. The words floated into the air, soft but unshakable, and for a moment even the city seemed to pause. The girl's hands rested on the rims of her wheelchair, her voice trembling only slightly as the golden gates of the Grand Meridian Theater towered before her. Afternoon light spilled across the marble steps, warm but indifferent, glinting off brass handles polished by 1,000 hands that were not hers. On the other side of the gate, a man in a navy suit stopped walking. He had been scrolling through his phone, lost in the rhythm of deadlines and board meetings, when that quiet sentence cracked something open inside him. The guard by the door shifted uneasily. "Young lady, this entrance is for ticket holders. Please move aside." The girl did not move. Her jeans were faded, her denim jacket too light for the chill that swept down the avenue. But her gaze did not waver. "My mother used to perform here," she said softly. "I just wanted to see the stage." The man's head lifted. Something in her tone, equal parts courage and ache, made him forget the phone in his hand. The name Grand Meridian had once meant everything to him. The stage, the spotlight, the triumphs. But hearing her speak turned that pride into something else, something smaller and colder. He walked closer, unsure why. "What is your name?" he asked. "Amira," she said. "My mother's name was Lila. She sang here a long time ago." He froze. The world around him dimmed, the noise of the city sinking into a low hum. Lila. That name lived in the theater's oldest records, in a time when the building was struggling to survive, and every performance was a gamble. He remembered her voice, warm and defiant. He remembered the day she left angry, heartbroken, disappearing into a crowd that had already chosen its favorites. The guard cleared his throat again. "Sir, she cannot stay here." "Oh," the man's tone softened. "It is all right. She can stay a moment." He crouched beside the chair. The metal wheels reflected the sunlight, drawing his eyes to the small scuffs and scratches along the frame. "Do you like music?" he asked quietly. Amira nodded. "It makes me forget that people look at the chair first." Her honesty struck him like a chord he had not played in years. For a second, he could not find words. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper meant for only him. "They said dreams need legs to stand on. But I do not believe that." He felt the truth move through him like a forgotten melody. He did not yet know who she really was, but something in that whisper told him this meeting was no accident. The next afternoon, the sky over the city turned a pale gray, the kind that softened everything it touched. The Grand Meridian Theater glowed quietly beneath it, its glass doors reflecting streaks of late light. Inside, preparations for the evening show filled the corridors with the faint hum of rehearsal music and rolling carts. Outside, the world still carried the echo of a small voice from the day before. Amira was back. Her wheelchair rolled slowly across the same marble walkway. She had come alone this time, a small backpack resting on her knees. Her face held the kind of calm that did not come from peace but from practice. She stopped near the same gate, where the guard now stood with folded arms. He recognized her immediately. "You again?" he asked, his tone flat. "I told you yesterday, this is not a place to sit and wait." "I am not waiting," she said quietly. "I am hoping." Her words hung in the air for a moment before he sighed. "Little girl, the theater is not open to visitors without a ticket. You need to go home." "I do not have one," she said, "but I thought maybe someone could help." Before the guard could answer, a voice came from behind him. "Let her in." It was the man in the navy suit. He stood at the top of the steps, one hand resting lightly on the railing. The guard hesitated, but the look in the man's eyes left no room for argument. He unlocked the gate and stepped aside. Amira's chair rolled forward, the sound of the wheels echoing faintly across the marble. The man waited until she stopped beside him. "You came back," he said. "Yes," Amira replied. "I wanted to see the place my mother loved." The man looked down at her, his voice softer now. "You said her name was Lila." She nodded. "She told me stories about the lights and the music, and how every night felt like magic." Her gaze moved toward the grand entrance. "I just wanted to feel what she felt, even if only for a moment." He studied her face. There was something hauntingly familiar in the way she spoke, the same grace that had once filled those halls. "Come," he said quietly. "I will show you the stage." The corridors inside smelled of old wood and polished brass. Posters from past performances lined the walls, their edges yellowed with time. Amira's eyes widened as they passed through the lobby and entered the main auditorium. The velvet seat stretched out before her like a crimson sea. High above, the chandelier shimmered in silence. "This is where she sang," the man said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I remember her first night. She was nervous, but she sang like no one was watching." Amira smiled faintly. "She said that once, too. She told me that when you sing, you should sing for the person you love most, even if they are not listening." He looked at her then, a deep unease stirring beneath the surface of memory. "Did she ever say why she stopped performing?" Amira hesitated. "She said someone told her she did not fit the image, that she did not belong on the big stage." The man's breath caught. He remembered the meeting. He remembered the papers, the decision made quickly, the reasoning dressed in elegant business terms. He had thought it was only one more routine management call. He never imagined the cost. Amira reached the edge of the stage. The polished floor reflected the light from the chandelier above. She placed one hand on the cool surface. "It is beautiful," she whispered. The man watched her, the weight of years pressing against his chest. "It was never as beautiful as it is now," he said quietly. A stagehand entered from the side door, surprised to see them. "Mr. Everett, the lighting crew is waiting." "I will be there in a moment," the man said without turning. The name hung in the air, Mr. Everett, the theater's CEO. Amira looked up, recognition dawning slowly. "You are the owner?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yes, though sometimes it feels like the theater owns me instead." She smiled, a small, brave curve of her lips. "Then maybe you can tell it to let me stay for a little while." Something in her voice broke the final wall around his heart. He nodded. "You can stay as long as you like." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the faint echoes of footsteps and distant music. Then Amira spoke again, her tone filled with gentle certainty. "I think dreams live longer than people think. My mother said that even when you are gone, your dream waits for someone else to find it." Mr. Everett turned toward the empty stage, where a single beam of light had escaped through the curtains. "Maybe she was right," he said. Amira looked at the light, her small hands folded in her lap. "Then maybe her dream was waiting for me." "Oh," he stared at her, realizing that this little girl had already done what 1,000 performances never could. She had turned a theater made of stone and glass into a place that could feel again. Outside, the rain began to fall, gentle and steady, washing the marble steps clean. Inside, beneath the chandelier's glow, a quiet promise was forming, one that neither of them fully understood yet, but both could feel. The truth had begun its slow approach, and neither the man nor the girl could stop it now. The following morning arrived wrapped in a soft drizzle that blurred the edges of the city skyline. The Grand Meridian Theater stood silent, its golden doors locked, but inside the air was alive with quiet motion. Technicians checked cables. A cleaning woman polished the marble floors. And in his office on the second floor, Mr. Everett sat at his desk, a half-finished cup of coffee cooling beside a folder that had not been opened in years. He had not stopped thinking about the girl. Every sound from the stage below seemed to echo her voice, that small but steady tone filled with dignity. He had spent most of his career avoiding memories, but now they came back uninvited. He opened the old folder, the one labeled Performance Year 2011. Inside lay a photograph of Lila, smiling beneath stage lights. She looked young, determined, alive. He traced the corner of the picture with one trembling hand. Beneath it, a letter in his own handwriting announced the end of her contract. The words stared back at him. Direction change, not a suitable image for lead roles. He read the line again and again, until it no longer sounded like business, it sounded like betrayal. Downstairs, Amira waited in the lobby. She had come early, wearing the same denim jacket and a knitted scarf someone had left for her on the back of a chair the night before. She watched the staff move around her. Most of them passed without a glance. To them, she was just a child in a wheelchair, sitting too still in a place that was always moving. But she did not mind. She was here, inside the theater her mother once called home. Mr. Everett appeared at the top of the grand staircase. When he saw her, he paused, his hand tightening on the rail. "You are early," he said as he approached. "I did not want to miss anything. Amira replied. The air here smells like her perfume, like roses and dust. He smiled faintly. You remember that? She used to tell me stories before bed, she said. She said one day I would hear her echo in the walls. He looked around the grand lobby, at the marble pillars and gilded frames. She was right. Some echoes never leave. Oh, he motioned toward the elevator. Come with me. There is something I want you to see. They entered a rehearsal hall on the second floor. It was smaller than the main stage, lined with mirrors and wooden floors worn smooth by years of dancers. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, pooling around them like warm gold. This was the room where she practiced, Mr. Everett said. She stood right there, near the piano. Amira's eyes followed his gesture. She rolled closer and placed her hand on the edge of the piano. Dust glimmered under her fingertips. I can almost hear her, she whispered. She used to hum when she was nervous, he said. I remember thinking she sounded like a song waiting to be finished. They stood in silence, the air heavy with memory. Then Amira asked, why did she stop? The question sliced through him. He looked at the floor, at his reflection broken by sunlight. Because people made decisions they thought were right for the theater, he said carefully. Amira tilted her head. Did those people ever say sorry? He swallowed hard. No, they did not. She nodded slowly, her face unreadable. Sometimes sorry is the start of a song, too. Her words caught him off guard. He had heard executives and critics speak for decades, but no one had ever said something so simple that it hurt. He knelt slightly so his eyes met hers. Amira, your mother was extraordinary. I wish I had understood that sooner. She smiled, small but true. Then maybe it is not too late to listen. Later that afternoon, as rehearsals began, Mr. Everett stood in the shadows near the stage. Amira sat quietly in the front row, watching the performers move through their steps. The music rose, filled the theater, and somewhere between the notes, he could almost see Lila again, her laughter, her grace, the way she used to stand with her chin lifted toward the lights. He realized that for all his success, he had forgotten what art was meant to do. It was not about image or prestige, it was about truth, and somehow, a child had reminded him of that. When the rehearsal ended, he walked toward Amira. Would you like to come back tomorrow? He asked. Her eyes brightened. May I? Yes, he said. I think your mother would have wanted you to. As they left the auditorium, the cleaning woman stopped sweeping and watched them pass. The tall man in the dark suit walking beside a little girl in a wheelchair. It was a simple image, but something about it made her smile. She whispered to herself, that is what real theater looks like. Outside, the drizzle had turned to sunlight. The city sparkled, its puddles catching the glow like tiny mirrors. Mr. Everett held the door open, and Amira rolled through, her wheels leaving faint wet tracks on the marble floor. At the edge of the steps, she looked back. Mr. Everett, can I ask one more thing? Of course, he said. If my mother's song was waiting, do you think it was waiting for both of us? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes, Amira, I think it was. She smiled. And in that smile he saw the reflection of everything he had lost and everything he might still redeem. For the first time in many years, the theater's doors did not feel like barriers. They felt like beginnings. The following evening, the Grand Meridian Theater pulsed with quiet anticipation. It was rehearsal night again, and the glow of stage lights poured through the windows, painting gold streaks across the dark street. Inside, the orchestra was tuning, the murmur of violins rising like a whisper before a storm. Mr. Everett stood near the wings of the stage, his tie loosened, watching his staff move with practiced efficiency. Yet his attention was fixed, not on them, but on the small figure rolling through the aisle below. Amira had returned, her chair gliding silently between rows of red velvet seats. She wore the same denim jacket, though tonight there was a small pin attached to it, a silver music note shaped like a crescent moon. She looked up at the lights, her eyes wide with wonder. It feels like the sky came inside, she said softly. Mr. Everett smiled faintly. In a way, it did. Every performance is a little universe, built for one night. She tilted her head. Did you ever sing, Mr. Everett? He chuckled quietly. No. I always thought my voice was better suited for business meetings than for songs. Then maybe you listened instead, she said. My mother said good listeners are rare. They keep music alive. Her words lingered in the air as he led her closer to the stage. The rehearsal paused for a short break, and a few dancers nodded curiously at the girl. None of them knew her story yet, but something in her calm presence made them lower their voices and smile. Mr. Everett guided her toward the side corridor that led to the backstage area. "There is something back here," he said. "I think you should see it." They passed through a heavy curtain into a hallway filled with old props and stage costumes. Mannequins wore faded dresses from past productions, their sequins dull under the yellow light. A faint scent of dust and perfume lingered, the smell of history and forgotten applause. He stopped in front of a door marked Storage B. "Your mother used to keep her things in here," he said. "When she left, we boxed everything away. No one has opened it since." "Oh?" Amira's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the handle. The door creaked open, and the room greeted them with the stillness of memory. Stacks of boxes lined the walls, each labeled with a year. Near the corner sat a small trunk painted with faded flowers. Mr. Everett knelt and opened it carefully. Inside were costume sketches, a pair of worn ballet shoes, and a small notebook tied with a ribbon. Amira lifted the notebook and brushed away the dust. The first page carried her mother's handwriting, "For the one who will finish my song." Her breath caught. "She wrote this," she whispered. Mr. Everett nodded. "I remember that book. She used to write lyrics in between rehearsals. Sometimes she would sing them when the theater was empty." Amira turned the pages slowly. Each line was filled with unfinished verses, bits of melodies, and notes about hope, light, and belonging. "She wanted to write her own musical," she said, her voice trembling with pride. "She almost did," Mr. Everett said softly. "But the investors did not believe in a lead who looked different from what they imagined. I told her to wait, to compromise. She told me that art should not beg." Amira looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "You knew her better than anyone, did you not?" He exhaled slowly. "Perhaps I did. And yet, I failed her." Amira shook her head gently. "You did not fail her. You are still here. That means you still can help her dream." Her words struck him with quiet force. He watched her turn back to the notebook, reading lines written by a woman he once respected and hurt. The handwriting looped with energy, alive even after years of silence. Suddenly, the distant sound of the orchestra swelled through the walls, filling the storage room with faint music. Amira smiled, holding the notebook close. "It sounds like she is answering," she said. "Mr." Everett closed his eyes. For a moment, he could almost hear Lila's voice blending with the instruments, a ghostly harmony that pulled at his chest. When he opened his eyes again, Amira was looking at him with a quiet certainty that felt older than her years. "Mr. Everett," she said softly, "if I learn her song, can I sing it here someday?" He hesitated, emotion tightening his throat. "Yes," he said at last. "You have my promise." Amira nodded, her small smile returning. "Then it is not forgotten." They sat there for a long moment, surrounded by boxes of memories, the air thick with dust, and the faint scent of roses. He realized that this room, once filled with discarded dreams, now felt alive again. When they finally left, Amira carried the notebook carefully on her lap. The hallway lights flickered as they passed, and somewhere deep in the building, a single bulb hummed like a low note of music. Outside the theater, the evening wind brushed against the windows, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter from a nearby street. Mr. Everett locked the door behind them and looked up at the marquee glowing above the entrance. For years, those lights had represented success and pride. Now, as he glanced down at the girl holding her mother's notebook, they looked like something else entirely. They looked like a chance to begin again. As they parted ways that night, he could not shake the feeling that Lila had never truly left the theater. Through her daughter, through the songs still waiting to be sung, her presence remained. And for the first time in his life, Mr. Everett understood that redemption does not come from applause, it begins the moment someone listens. The next day arrived with a crisp chill that swept through the city like a clean page waiting for words. The morning light glimmered across the glass doors of the Grand Meridian Theater, carrying the promise of something new. Inside, the scent of freshly polished wood mingled with the faint sweetness of roses, a fragrance that seemed to follow Amira wherever she went. Mr. Everett stood by the ticket counter, reviewing the day's rehearsal schedule. He had not told anyone about the notebook Amira had found, but the image of her holding its small hands cradling something too sacred to belong to one person had stayed with him all night. Every few moments, he caught himself glancing at the main doors, waiting. At 10 o'clock sharp, the doors opened, and Amira rolled in. She wore a scarf patterned with tiny golden stars, and on her lap sat her mother's notebook, carefully tied with its ribbon. Her smile was polite but unsure. "You said I could come back," she said. "And I meant it," Mr. Everett replied. "Come, I want to show you something." He led her through the lobby to a private rehearsal room behind the stage. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, cutting across the floor in long bands of gold. In the center of the room stood a piano that had not been played in years. Its surface gleamed with dust motes, each one catching the light like glitter. "I had this piano moved here this morning," he said. "It is the same one your mother practiced on. It was hidden in storage, just like her notebook." Amira's eyes widened. She reached out, running her fingers gently over the smooth keys. "It still feels warm," she whispered. "Do you play?" he asked. "A little," she said. "My mother taught me when I was small. She said music is a way of remembering people, even when you forget their faces." Her words carried a quiet weight that settled deep inside him. "Would you like to play something now?" Amira nodded slowly. She opened the notebook, found a page marked with a folded corner, and set it on the piano stand. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched the keys. The first notes were hesitant, fragile, like footsteps on new ground. Then the melody found its rhythm, soft and full of longing. Mr. Everett stood behind her, watching her shoulders move with the rhythm. He could almost hear Lila's voice rising with the music, blending with the child's uncertain tune. The sound filled the small room, gentle yet powerful, a bridge between past and present. When the last note faded, Amira looked up. "I think she wrote this for someone," she said. Mr. Everett swallowed hard. "Yes, I think she did." There was a pause, long and full of understanding. Then Amira said, "Mr. Everett, may I ask you something?" "Of course," he said. "Why did she stop believing?" He sighed and walked to the window. "Sometimes people lose faith when others close the doors they were meant to walk through. I was one of those people who closed a door on her. I thought I was protecting the theater, but I was wrong. I was protecting my fear." Amira listened quietly, her small fingers resting on the piano keys. "Maybe doors close so we can build new ones," she said. "My mother said, every locked door has a song waiting behind it." "No." He turned toward her, humbled by the calm in her voice. "You are very wise, Amira." She smiled softly. "I just listen." Music teaches you how to listen. The sound of footsteps interrupted them. A stagehand appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Everett, the evening board meeting has been rescheduled. They are asking for you in the conference room." Mr. Everett nodded. "Tell them I will be there soon." The man left, and silence returned. Amira closed the notebook carefully and placed it back on her lap. "You can go if you need to," she said. He shook his head. "They can wait." He crouched beside her. "I have been thinking. You and your mother's song deserve more than dusty pages. How would you feel about performing it? Not in front of a crowd yet, just a small gathering, my staff perhaps, to let her music breathe again." Her eyes widened, equal parts, excitement and disbelief. "Me? But I am not a performer." He smiled gently. "Neither was your mother at first. The stage does not ask for perfection, only honesty, and I think you already have that." For a long moment, Amira stared at the piano, her reflection shimmering faintly on its black surface. "If I sing it, will it make her proud?" Mr. Everett placed a hand on the top of the piano. "She would be more than proud. She would be grateful that her voice found its way home." Amira nodded slowly. "Then I will try." That afternoon, he arranged for the small rehearsal hall to be prepared. A few staff members were invited to stay after work. No announcements, no publicity, just an intimate gathering. As evening fell, Amira sat at the piano again, her mother's notebook open before her. When the first note sounded, every conversation stopped. Her voice rose, trembling but pure. The melody filled the space, like light filling water. The lyrics spoke of hope, forgiveness, and the courage to keep dreaming when the world says no. Mr. Everett stood in the back, hands clasped tightly. Each word was both a memory and a promise. He realized then that the girl was not merely continuing her mother's legacy, she was rewriting it. When the final note faded, silence followed, deep and reverent. Then, slowly, the room erupted in gentle applause. Amira looked up, surprised, then smiled through tears. "Mr." Everett stepped forward, his own eyes shining. "You did it," he said quietly. Amira looked at him, her voice soft. "No, Mr. Everett, we did." In that moment, beneath the golden lights of the old theater, two generations found a single rhythm, one born from regret, the other from courage. And somewhere unseen, the echoes of Lila's voice seemed to whisper through the air, tender and proud, carrying her song farther than it had ever gone before. The next morning began quietly, almost too quietly for a building that usually hummed with life. The sunlight touched the letters of the Grand Meridian sign, making them gleam like freshly polished gold. Inside, the scent of last night's applause still lingered faintly, mixed with the soft dust that lived in every old theater. But one thing was different. The seat by the piano was empty. Mr. Everett arrived early, expecting to find Amira waiting in the small rehearsal room as she always did. He checked the hall, the lobby, and even the storage room where they had found her mother's notebook. Nothing. The notebook still sat on the piano, neatly closed, tied again with its ribbon, as if she had meant to return. He felt a strange tightening in his chest. She would not just leave, he murmured to himself. He called the front desk. The guard confirmed that Amira had not entered the building that morning. "She came by late last night, sir," the guard added hesitantly. "She said she was going to visit her mother's old neighborhood. She left before dawn." Mr. Everett stood in silence for a moment. The theater suddenly felt too large, its corridors stretching like hollow echoes. He realized how easily a promise could slip away when left unspoken. Without another thought, he grabbed his coat and stepped outside. The city was just waking up. Vendors rolled out their carts, buses hissed along wet streets, and the air smelled faintly of bread and rain. Mr. Everett's car waited by the curb, but he did not call for his driver. Instead, he began to walk. He needed the time to think. The old neighborhood where Lila had lived was only a few miles away. When he arrived, he saw rows of aging apartment buildings with chipped paint and crooked balconies. He asked a woman sweeping her steps if she knew a girl in a wheelchair named Amira. The woman pointed down the street. "You mean the little one with the blue scarf?" She was heading to the park by the river earlier. He thanked her and followed the narrow sidewalk until the sound of water reached his ears. There, beneath the shade of an old oak tree, he saw her. Amira sat by the riverbank, her chair parked close to the railing. A notebook lay open on her lap, its pages fluttering in the breeze. She was humming softly to herself, her voice barely louder than the current. "Amira," he called gently. She turned, startled, then smiled. "Mr. Everett, you found me." "I was worried," he said. "You disappeared without telling anyone." "I wanted to see where my mother used to write her songs," she said. "She told me about this place. She said the sound of the river helped her find her words again." He walked closer, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes. "You should not have come alone." "I am not alone," she said. "I have her words and I have you." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind moved through the trees, scattering golden leaves around them. Mr. Everett finally asked, "Why did you leave the notebook behind?" She looked down at the open pages. "Because it does not belong to me. It belongs to the theater. I just wanted to finish her song once, to make sure someone heard it. Now it should live where it started." Her words cut deeper than he expected. He sat down on the bench beside her. "You have given this theater more life than I have in decades," he said. "Without you, it would still be a building of echoes." Amira smiled faintly. "Then maybe we gave it back together." He looked at her then, noticing how small she seemed against the wide stretch of river. Yet there was nothing fragile about her. Her presence filled the air like quiet sunlight. "Amira," he said carefully, "there is something else I want to offer you. A place to stay for now. Somewhere safe and warm. You should not have to travel alone." She hesitated. "I do not want to be a burden." "You are not," he said firmly. "You are the reason this place feels alive again. You belong in its story, not outside its doors." After a long pause, she nodded. "All right, but only if I can still visit the river sometimes." "You have my word," he said. As they made their way back to the theater, the city began to glow with midday light. Cars moved slowly, the rhythm of life returning around them. When they reached the marble steps, the staff looked surprised to see the pair walking together again. Mr. Everett turned to his assistant. "Prepare one of the guest suites upstairs. Amira will be staying here for a few days." The assistant blinked. "Of course, sir." Amira glanced up at him. "You really do not have to do that." "I know," he said with a small smile. "But I want to." Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Mr. Everett walked through the empty lobby. The chandelier glowed softly above him, scattering light across the marble floor. He could hear faint music drifting from the rehearsal room. He followed the sound and found Amira at the piano again, her small hands moving gently across the keys. "I thought you would be resting," he said quietly. "I cannot sleep when there is music in my head," she replied. "It feels like she is still writing." He leaned against the doorway, listening. The melody was different tonight, slower, deeper, touched by something new. It was not just her mother's song anymore. It was hers too. When she finished, she turned to him. "Did you hear that part in the middle? I changed it. It needed hope." He nodded. "It did, and you gave it that." She smiled, her eyes bright in the warm light. "Then maybe tomorrow I will write another verse." He returned her smile. "Tomorrow will be waiting." That night, as the theater settled into silence, Mr. Everett realized that something inside him had shifted. What began as an old man's guilt had become something gentler, something like peace. For the first time in years, he felt as though the theater was no longer haunted. It was healing through a child's voice, through a mother's song, through the courage to begin again. The following week brought the soft hum of change to the Grand Meridian Theater. The air inside no longer felt heavy or haunted. It felt awake. The chandeliers shimmered brighter, the staff spoke more kindly, and every sound seemed touched by a quiet, invisible warmth. Amira had become a small part of that rhythm. Her wheelchair rolled gently across the stage each morning, her scarf trailing behind like a thread of blue light. Mr. Everett watched her from the wings, feeling something he had not felt in years: hope without fear. She filled the empty spaces of the theater with life, speaking to the crew, greeting the dancers, and listening to the orchestra as if every note carried a secret only she could hear. It amazed him how easily she belonged. That afternoon, as rehearsals began, the stage lights flared, and a hush spread through the hall. The lead actress was about to perform her solo number when the projector above the stage flickered. A faint buzz followed. The spotlight dimmed, then blinked out completely. A few gasps rippled through the audience of staff and technicians. "Power surge," the lighting technician muttered, climbing onto the control platform. Amira looked up from her seat near the front row. The theater darkened, and only the faint glow from the exit lights remained. Then, through the quiet, a single voice broke the stillness. "Would you like me to read the lines while they fix the light?" Amira asked softly. The actress turned toward her, surprised. "Mr." Everett froze where he stood. "I remember them," Amira continued, lifting her mother's notebook slightly. "I read them last night." The stage crew exchanged glances. Someone whispered, "She memorized the script?" Mr. Everett nodded once. "Let her try." Amira wheeled closer to the foot of the stage. The room was still dark except for a faint glow from the chandelier above. Then she began to speak, her voice small but unwavering. "The stars do not sing because they are perfect," she said. "They sing because someone is listening." Her tone was calm, her rhythm steady. It was not a performance of mimicry but of feeling. Each line she spoke carried warmth and clarity, wrapping the audience in silence. Even without lights, the space glowed. The lead actress lowered her script and listened, tears forming in her eyes. The orchestra, sensing the moment, joined in softly. Violins rose, gentle as dawn, filling the void with light made of sound. Mr. Everett felt his chest tighten. The words, the music, the faint tremor in Amira's voice, it was Lila's world again, alive and breathing. For a few precious minutes, the theater was no longer a building. It was a heartbeat. When the final line ended, the silence that followed was deeper than applause. Then, slowly, the lights flickered back to life. The chandelier shone once more, scattering gold across the room. Everyone looked toward Amira. She blinked, startled by the sudden brightness. Then the entire hall erupted into soft clapping. The stagehands, the dancers, The technicians all applauded, not for a rehearsed scene, but for the truth they had just felt. Amira looked down, her cheeks glowing. "I was only helping," she said shyly. Mr. Everett walked to her side. "You did more than help," he said. "You reminded everyone why this theater exists." She smiled up at him. "Then maybe my mother's song was not only for her. Maybe it was for everyone who forgot to listen." He nodded, speechless for a moment. "I believe you are right." Later that day, after rehearsals ended, Amira sat with Mr. Everett in his office overlooking the main hall. The city stretched beyond the glass windows, glowing beneath the late afternoon Sunday. "Do you think people change, Mr. Everett?" she asked. "Yes," he said after a pause. "Sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. But they change when they are reminded of what matters." She traced her fingers along the edge of the notebook. "Then I am glad I came back, because I think this place needed a reminder." He smiled, the corners of his eyes softening. "And so did I." A knock sounded at the door. His assistant entered, carrying a folder. "Sir, the archives team finished restoring the old records you requested." Mr. Everett took the folder, glancing at the first few pages. It was the official cast list from over a decade ago. He flipped through it, stopping at a familiar name: Lila Monroe, lead vocalist. Next to it, in neat handwriting, was a note he had never seen before. It read, "One day, this stage will belong to every voice that dares to speak." He stared at the line for a long time before handing the paper to Amira. "Your mother wrote this?" Amira nodded. "Yes. She said that when she first got her chance to sing." "Mr." Everett leaned back in his chair, his voice low. "Then we will make sure her words come true." Outside, the last rays of daylight spilled through the tall windows, washing the office in a golden glow. Dust motes danced like tiny stars in the light. Amira closed her eyes and whispered, "She would have loved this view." "She would have loved seeing you here," he said gently. When she looked up, he saw that same light in her eyes, the kind that made ordinary moments feel sacred. The city outside began to fade into evening, the noise of traffic melting into a hum. The Grand Meridian Theater stood quiet again, but it was not the same quiet as before. It was a silence filled with promise. Somewhere within its walls, between the echoes of footsteps and the faint hum of lights, Lila's song still lingered. And through her daughter's courage, it had found its way back into the world, not as a performance, but as a truth that could never be turned off again. That night, the Grand Meridian Theater stood quiet under a silver sky. The city around it buzzed with life, but inside, only the soft hum of the ceiling lights remained. Mr. Everett sat alone in his office, the folder of old records still open on his desk. His glasses rested beside a cup of untouched tea, and the paper beneath his hands seemed heavier with every line he reread. The list of names glowed under the desk lamp. It was a record of every performer he had once hired and every dream he had quietly turned away. Next to Lila's name, his own signature curved in bold ink, authorizing her dismissal. For years, he had convinced himself it was business. Now it looked like cowardice written in permanent ink. Downstairs, the faint sound of a piano drifted through the empty corridors. Amira was playing again. The melody was softer tonight, slower, the kind of tune that carries a memory from one heart to another. He rose from his chair and followed the sound. When he reached the rehearsal hall, he stopped at the door. Amira sat at the piano in her blue scarf, her fingers tracing gentle patterns across the keys. The notes shimmered like candlelight. He spoke quietly so as not to startle her. "You are still awake." She looked up and smiled. "Music does not like to sleep early." He chuckled softly and entered the room. "I suppose it never did, not for your mother either." Amira tilted her head. "You remember how she played?" "I remember everything," he said. "I remember the way she used to hum when the curtain closed. I remember her laugh echoing through these halls. And I remember the day I told her she would not be needed anymore." Amira's hands paused above the keys. "Why did you?" He took a deep breath. "Fear. The investors were afraid that audiences would not accept her. They said she did not fit the image we wanted for the theater. I told myself it was a business decision. But really, I was afraid of losing their approval. I thought I was saving the theater, but I was only saving my pride." The piano sat between them, a quiet witness. Amira lowered her gaze to the keys. "You did not mean to hurt her," she said softly. "No," he said. "But I did. And that is the part I must live with." The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the lights. Amira turned one page of the notebook, her mother's handwriting looping across the paper. "She wrote this after you told her to leave," Amira said. She said, "One day, he will understand that the song is not mine alone. It belongs to the place that silenced it." Mr. Everett felt his throat tighten. She was right, and now her song belongs here again, through you. Amira smiled faintly. "Then maybe she forgave you long ago." He looked at her, unsure how to answer. "Do you really think so?" "Yes," she said, "because forgiveness is part of her song. You can hear it in every note." He sat down on a chair beside her. "When you speak, you sound like her." "I sound like myself," Amira said, "but she lives in my voice." The simplicity of her words made him blink away tears he had not expected. He had spent years surrounded by music but had never truly listened until now. They sat together in silence for a while. Then Amira began to play again. The melody grew stronger, no longer hesitant. It filled the hall, stretching into corners long untouched by sound. It was both a memory and a rebirth. Mr. Everett closed his eyes. For the first time, he allowed himself to remember Lila, not as the singer he dismissed, but as the woman who had believed in something greater than image or profit. When the song ended, Amira turned toward him. "Mr. Everett," she said gently, "if you could speak to her now, what would you say?" He stared at the piano keys for a long moment. "I would say I am sorry. I would say that I see her now. I would say that her dream was worth more than every number on every contract I ever signed." Amira nodded, her eyes bright. "Then maybe you should write that down." He frowned slightly. "Write it?" "Yes," she said. "Write it like she did. So the theater remembers. So her song does not fade again." "Oh," he smiled through the ache in his chest. "You have your mother's wisdom." She grinned. "That means you have no excuse to forget it." He laughed softly, the sound echoing gently through the empty room. Later, when she went to rest, he returned to his office. The city lights flickered outside his window, and the rain began to fall, steady and patient. He took out a blank sheet of paper and began to write. "To Lila Monroe, whose voice still lives within these walls. I once silenced you out of fear. But through your daughter, I have learned that art is not about perfection or image. It is about truth, courage, and the sound of hearts refusing to stay quiet. I am sorry." He signed the letter quietly, sealing it with care. Then he placed it inside the folder of theater archives, between the pages of the old performance list. When he closed the folder, he looked up at the ceiling. The faint sound of Amira's piano still floated through the air, blending with the rain outside. And in that quiet moment, he felt something break and mend at the same time, the weight of guilt turning into something lighter, something like grace. He whispered into the stillness, "Thank you, Lila, and thank you, Amira." Outside, the storm faded to a mist. The theater lights dimmed, leaving only the glow of one lamp in the hallway. Beneath it, the letter waited a record, not of loss, but of understanding. And for the first time in years, Mr. Everett felt that the theater had finally forgiven him, too. The morning light spread across the city like a slow exhale, touching every rooftop before settling on the glass facade of the Grand Meridian Theater. Inside, the day began with a quiet rhythm. The stage crew unpacked boxes, dusted the seats, and spoke in hushed tones, as though something sacred lingered in the air. The performance from the night before, the one Amira had saved when the lights went out, had changed the atmosphere completely. The staff carried themselves differently now, softer, more aware. Mr. Everett arrived earlier than usual, his overcoat damp from the morning mist. He paused in the lobby, breathing in the scent of polish and dust, listening to the faint hum of a vacuum cleaner somewhere in the distance. On the far side of the room, Amira sat near the ticket counter, her mother's notebook open on her lap. Her scarf, a shade of deep blue, framed her small face like a sky that refused to fade. He walked over, his steps echoing gently against the marble floor. "Good morning, Amira." She looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Everett. Have you had breakfast?" he asked. "Not yet," she said. "I wanted to finish this page first." She tapped the open notebook lightly. "It is a letter my mother wrote but never sent." He leaned down to read. The handwriting was graceful, looping across the paper with quiet confidence. To the man who built the stage but forgot to listen one day, I hope you remember that art was never meant to impress, it was meant to heal. Mr. Everett stood silent for a long moment. The words struck deep, not as an accusation, but as a truth he could no longer deny. Amira closed the notebook carefully. She wrote it for you, I think, but she never got to give it to you. He nodded slowly. Then I will make sure it is not wasted. A pause settled between them, comfortable and real. Then he said, There is something I want to show you today. It is important. Amira tilted her head, curious. What is it? You will see, he said with a small smile. But first, we need to go somewhere together. They left the theater and stepped into the morning light. The city was already alive, street vendors calling out prices, buses sighing at stops, and people hurrying toward offices. Mr. Everett's car waited at the curb, its windows gleaming. He opened the door for her and helped guide the wheelchair inside with practiced care. As they drove, the city blurred past in shades of gray and gold. Amira looked out the window. Where are we going? To a place your mother loved, he said. She used to go there before every performance. She said it helped her remember why she sang. The car stopped in front of an old community center. Its red brick walls were cracked but strong, and a faded mural stretched across one side, showing children painting beneath a sun of bright yellow. Inside, the sound of laughter spilled through the doorway. Amira's eyes widened as they entered. The room was full of children, some with crutches, some in wheelchairs, some simply sitting cross-legged on the floor. A woman stood at the front, leading them in a soft rhythm exercise. Music filled the air, clumsy but joyful. Mr. Everett turned to Amira. This was your mother's favorite place. She used to teach music here once a week, long before the theater discovered her. She said this was where she learned what real applause sounds like. Amira smiled softly. It sounds like hearts instead of hands. He nodded. Exactly. The woman leading the class noticed them and waved. Mr. Everett, it has been years. Is that her? He smiled. Yes, this is Amira, Lila's daughter. Gasps and smiles rippled through the room. The children turned to look. Some clapping, some whispering her name as if they already knew her story. Amira's face flushed pink, but she waved shyly. Mr. Everett knelt beside her chair. I wanted you to see this place because it still carries her music, and because I would like to ask something of you. She blinked. Ask me what? I would like you to come here once a week, he said. Not to perform, not to impress, just to share her songs, the way she did. The theater can sponsor music lessons for these children. You could help me start it. Amira's eyes grew wide. You mean teach them? Yes, he said. Teach them, play with them, remind them that dreams do not need permission to exist. Her fingers brushed against the notebook in her lap. She would have loved that, she said softly. Then it is settled, he said. As the children gathered around, Amira reached for the piano at the corner of the room. Its keys were chipped, the bench wobbly, but when her fingers touched the instrument, the room filled with sound. The children clapped along, laughing, singing fragments of melody. The air vibrated with joy. Mr. Everett watched from the back, his hands folded over his chest. For the first time in years, he saw what art truly looked like when freed from fear, messy, imperfect, but full of life. When the lesson ended, one of the smallest boys tugged at Amira's scarf and said, "You play like sunlight." She laughed, her eyes bright. "Then I will come back and bring more sunlight next time." As they left the community center, the wind lifted the pages of the notebook in her lap. The unfinished lyrics fluttered, as if eager to be sung again. Mr. Everett looked at her and said quietly, "Thank you, Amira. You have given me something I did not know I had lost." She turned toward him with a smile that seemed to hold her mother's strength and her own hope. "You gave it back to yourself," she said. The city stretched before them, glowing under the afternoon sunday. Somewhere behind them, the sound of children's laughter rose like a melody that refused to fade. And for the first time, Mr. Everett believed that redemption was not a word written in regret. It was a song, and it was still being sung. The following week, the Grand Meridian Theater glowed brighter than it had in years. Sunlight streamed through its tall windows, dust motes danced in the beams of light, and the faint echo of piano music carried through the halls. The sound came from the main stage where Amira sat in her wheelchair near the center, her small hands moving gently over the keys. Mr. Everett stood in the shadows of the aisle, watching her. It had become their quiet routine. She would play every morning, and he would listen without interrupting. But today was different. The stage had been cleared, and the curtains were half drawn, as though the theater itself was preparing for something sacred. He stepped forward. "Amira," he said, his voice warm but steady. "Do you know what today is?" She looked up, her eyes bright under the stage lights. "It feels like a special day." "Oh, it is," he said. "This is the day I promised you, the day you take the stage." Amira blinked in surprise. "You mean, for real?" "Yes," he said with a nod. "We are not selling tickets, and there will be no reporters. It will be just the staff, a few guests from the community center, and anyone who wants to listen. You deserve to stand or sit under the same lights your mother once did." For a moment, she said nothing. Her hands rested on the piano keys, her breath catching softly. "I do not know if I am ready." He crouched beside her chair. "Neither did your mother, the first time she sang here, but she did it anyway. Sometimes readiness is not about knowing. It is about trusting the moment." She nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then I will trust it." The next few hours passed like a dream. The theater staff moved quietly, adjusting lights, setting microphones, dusting the velvet curtains. Amira wore a white dress with lace sleeves that shimmered when the light touched it. Around her wrist, she wore a bracelet with tiny silver charms, each one shaped like a note of music. Mr. Everett had given it to her that morning, saying, "It belonged to your mother." She always said it helped her remember the rhythm of her heart. When the time came, the audience gathered quietly. A few children from the community center sat in the front row, whispering to one another. The dancers, technicians, and ushers filled the rest of the seats. The lights dimmed, and the gentle hum of anticipation spread through the hall. Mr. Everett stepped onto the stage first. His voice echoed softly through the microphone. "Thank you for being here," he began. "For years, this theater has been a place of performance, but tonight, it will be something else. Tonight, it will be a place of remembrance and of renewal. I would like to introduce someone who has reminded all of us why we began this journey. Please welcome Amira Monroe." The spotlight shifted, bathing the stage in soft gold. Amira wheeled herself forward slowly, her small hands steady on the rims. The hall was silent except for the faint creak of her chair against the wooden floor. She stopped near the piano, took a breath, and looked out at the audience. "This is my mother's song," she said. "But she said every song becomes new when someone else believes in it. So tonight, I will sing for her and for anyone who was ever told they did not belong." Her voice rose into the quiet. It began soft, like a whisper traveling through the dark. Each note carried warmth, each word felt alive. The lyrics spoke of doors once closed and lights once dimmed, but also of the courage to try again. The melody reached the rafters, gentle yet powerful, wrapping around everyone who listened. Mr. Everett felt his eyes sting. He stood at the edge of the stage, one hand over his heart. The sound of her voice filled the space between grief and grace, between what had been lost and what was finally found. When the song ended, silence followed thick, reverent, endless. Then the audience stood, one by one, and the applause began. It was not loud or wild. It was tender, like a heartbeat echoing across the years. Amira looked around, her eyes wide with disbelief. She smiled through tears. "I did it," she whispered. Mr. Everett stepped forward, his own tears glinting under the lights. "You did more than that," he said softly. "You brought her home." The crowd quieted as Amira lifted her bracelet toward the light. "She used to tell me," she said, "that dreams do not need legs to walk, they just need somewhere to begin." Her words rippled through the audience like a prayer. Several people wiped their eyes. The children in the front row clapped again, louder this time. When the stage lights dimmed, Mr. Everett helped her down from the platform. Together they stood at the center aisle, surrounded by the warm murmur of people still clapping. As they turned toward the exit, Amira looked back one last time at the stage. "Do you think she heard me?" she asked. He smiled gently. "I think she never stopped listening." Outside, the evening sky glowed with the soft colors of twilight. The streetlights flickered on, and the sound of distant traffic blended with the laughter of people leaving the theater. Mr. Everett looked down at the small girl beside him. You know, Amira, your performance was more than music. It was a promise. She tilted her head. A promise of what? That this theater, he said, will never again turn away a voice that deserves to be heard. Amira smiled, her expression calm and full of quiet strength. Then it will be a good home for songs. Renkris. The two of them stood for a moment under the golden glow of the marquee. The night air felt cool and clean, carrying with it the faint echo of her mother's melody. And in that sound, the past and present finally moved together, not as sorrow and memory, but as harmony, a song that had learned how to live again. The next morning, the Grand Meridian Theater was still and golden, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath after what had happened the night before. The air smelled faintly of roses and dust, the same scent that always seemed to follow Amira. On the stage, confetti from the small celebration lay scattered like forgotten stars. Mr. Everett stood at the edge of the auditorium, gazing at the empty seats. He could still hear her voice echoing in his mind, the way it had filled the room, the way it had reached places no spotlight ever could. The sound had not just touched the theater. It had changed it. It had changed him. He turned when he heard the soft whir of wheels behind him. Amira was there, wearing a light yellow dress and the same blue scarf she always wore when she played. Her mother's bracelet glinted under the soft light. "Good morning, Mr. Everett," she said, her voice gentle but bright. "Good morning, Amira," he replied. "How are you feeling today?" "I am happy," she said. "But it feels quiet now, like the music went back to sleep." He smiled. "Sometimes, after something beautiful happens, the world needs a moment to rest. That silence is where the next song begins." She thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "Then maybe the next song will be even louder." He laughed softly. "I think it already is." They walked on foot, she rolling beside him down the aisle toward the stage. The morning sunlight spilled through the high windows, painting golden lines on the floor. Amira's shadow stretched beside his, small but strong. "I have something for you," he said when they reached the piano. He placed a small envelope on the top of it. She looked at it curiously. "What is it?" "An invitation," he said. "There is a performance at the community center this weekend. The children you met will be singing, and they asked if you would like to lead them." Her eyes widened. "Lead them? Like a teacher?" "Exactly like that," he said. "They said they want to sing your song, the one you sang last night." "Oh." For a moment, she did not answer. Her hands rested on the edge of the piano, and her expression softened. "My song," she whispered. "But it was my mother's first." "Yes," he said, "and now it is yours. That is how songs live forever. They pass from one voice to another." Amira smiled, and it was the kind of smile that seemed to light the air around her. "Then I will go. I will help them sing." "Good," he said. "I think she would want that." "No." He stepped back, watching as she opened her mother's notebook again. The pages were worn now, but each line of handwriting still looked alive. She began to hum one of the unfinished melodies under her breath. "You know," she said quietly, "sometimes I imagine she is still here. Maybe she is sitting in the balcony, listening. Maybe she never left the theater at all." Mr. Everett looked up at the balcony where dust floated through the sunlight. "I think you are right," he said. "Some people never leave the places that love them." The hours that followed were filled with quiet work. Amira practiced with the piano while Mr. Everett sorted through old theater documents. Every now and then, she would pause to ask about the instruments, the microphones, or the sound system. Her curiosity seemed endless, her energy gentle but constant. At one point, she said, "Mr. Everett, what made you build this theater in the first place?" He looked up from his papers. "A promise," he said simply. "When I was young, my father took me to see my first play. I remember thinking that the world looked softer under stage light. I built this theater to chase that feeling. But somewhere along the way, I started chasing something else: money, reputation, control. I forgot what the light was for." "And you remember now?" she asked. He smiled sadly. "You reminded me." That afternoon, they shared lunch in the small cafe next to the theater. The barista recognized them both and placed a single white rose in a glass on their table. "For the girl who sang last night," the woman said with a grin. Amira blushed. Thank you. When they returned to the theater, the sun had begun to set. The sky outside glowed with streaks of pink and orange, and the city lights flickered on one by one. Mr. Everett turned on the chandelier inside, and for a moment, it seemed like the stars had descended into the building. Amira rolled to the center of the stage and looked around. "It is so beautiful at this time of day," she said. He nodded. "It always was. I just forgot to look." She glanced up at the balcony again. "Do you ever get scared, Mr. Everett?" He took a deep breath. "I used to be. I was scared of failure, scared of forgiveness, scared of looking back. But not anymore." "Because of the song?" she asked. "Because of you," he said. Amira looked down, shy but pleased. "I think we are both learning how to listen." He smiled. "You are a better teacher than you know." As evening settled fully, Amira began to play one last song before leaving. The melody floated upward, soft and unhurried, filling every corner of the theater. It was not sad, it was peaceful. Mr. Everett stood in the aisle, his hands clasped behind his back, listening until the final note faded. Then he said quietly, "Tomorrow, we begin again." Amira turned toward him, her eyes calm and steady. "Yes," she said. "Tomorrow, we keep the light on." And as the theater doors closed behind them that night, the chandeliers continued to glow long after they had gone, as if the building itself refused to fall asleep. The song lingered in the air, a quiet reminder that every ending can become the beginning of something that lasts. The next day arrived wrapped in a soft spring wind that carried the scent of blooming magnolias down the street. The city felt lighter, brighter, as if something in the air had changed since Amira's song filled the Grand Meridian Theater. The morning sunlight poured through the tall glass doors, spilling across the marble floor like a path made of gold. Mr. Everett stood by the main entrance, speaking with the doorman, when he heard the familiar sound of small wheels turning. He turned to see Amira rolling toward him, her blue scarf fluttering in the breeze. She was dressed simply, in a white blouse and soft gray trousers, and in her lap rested her mother's old notebook. "You are early," he said with a smile. "I could not sleep," she replied. "I kept thinking about the community center and the children. They asked if we could sing again this weekend." He chuckled. "You have started something they will not let end." She grinned. "Then I must keep my promise." Together, they entered the theater. The staff greeted them warmly as they passed. The ushers smiled, the stagehands waved, and even the janitor paused his sweeping to nod politely. The air inside the theater no longer felt distant or cold. It was alive with quiet respect. When they reached the stage, Amira stopped her wheelchair at the foot of the stairs, her eyes lifted toward the velvet curtains. "Mr. Everett," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything," he replied. "Could I go through the front doors today?" He looked puzzled for a moment. "You always come through the front entrance." She shook her head. "I mean the main doors, the ones that open straight into the theater, the same doors the audience uses." For a brief second, he understood. His chest tightened as he remembered her first day, the moment she sat outside those very doors, turned away by people who never saw her heart, only her chair. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "You should enter through them today." He walked with her to the front lobby, where the sunlight pooled in bright squares on the floor. The great wooden doors stood before them, tall and gleaming, the same ones that had once kept her out. Mr. Everett pushed them open, and a burst of light filled the room. Amira hesitated at the threshold. "It feels different now," she whispered. He smiled gently. "That is because it is yours now. You belong here." She rolled forward slowly, the light wrapping around her like a blessing. The sound of her wheels against the marble echoed through the lobby, steady and graceful. A few of the staff paused their work and watched as she entered, their faces soft with understanding. When she reached the center of the lobby, she stopped and turned her chair toward Mr. Everett. "It feels like a door inside me opened too," she said quietly. He nodded. "That is what forgiveness does." They continued toward the main stage, where the afternoon sunlight spilled across the curtains. Mr. Everett walked beside her, hands clasped behind his back. "I have been thinking about something," he said. "What is it?" she asked. He looked around the grand hall, taking in the carved balconies and gilded columns. "For years, I built this theater to impress people, But I want to rebuild it now for another reason. I want it to become a place for everyone, for the young, the old, the rich, the poor, the strong, and the broken. I want to create something that your mother would have been proud of." Amira listened quietly, her expression thoughtful. "That sounds beautiful," she said. "What will you call it?" He smiled faintly. "The Open Door Project." Her eyes lit up. "That is perfect," she said. "Because doors are meant to open, not to keep people out." Mr. Everett laughed softly. "You really are your mother's daughter." They spent the afternoon preparing a small event to announce the project. A few photographers arrived, along with local reporters and community members. Amira sat near the front row, listening as Mr. Everett stood at the podium. "This theater was built to celebrate beauty," he said, his voice calm and clear. "But beauty means nothing if it is not shared. Today we begin a new chapter. The Grand Meridian will become a home for every voice, every song, every story that deserves to be heard." He paused, his eyes finding Amira's. "And this idea did not come from me. It came from a little girl who reminded me that dreams do not need permission. They only need courage." The audience turned toward her and began to clap softly. Amira blushed, her small hands folding over her mother's notebook. When the applause faded, Mr. Everett added, "Tomorrow, we will begin renovations to make the building more accessible. The front entrance, the stage ramps, and the rehearsal rooms will all be redesigned. Everyone will enter through the same doors." Oh, that single sentence earned a wave of applause that filled the theater like thunder. Amira felt tears sting her eyes. She had not expected to feel this much joy from something so simple. After the event, she rolled toward him. "You kept your promise," she said. "So did you," he replied. "You brought her music back." As the last of the visitors left, the sun dipped lower in the sky, sending long beams of orange light through the stained glass windows. Amira looked up, watching how the light danced across the marble floor. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "It always was," he answered. "But we can only see beauty clearly when our hearts are open." They stood there for a long while, an old man and a small girl, both changed by kindness and truth. The great doors behind them remained open, letting the evening breeze sweep through the hall. Outside, the city moved as it always had, unaware that something sacred had shifted within the walls of the old theater. But inside, the Grand Meridian glowed from within, alive again not because of the lights, but because of the people who had learned how to forgive and begin again. The days that followed were full of motion and new beginnings. The Grand Meridian Theater, once silent and cold, now hummed with the sounds of construction and laughter. Workers carried boxes of paint, the scent of fresh wood varnish filled the air, and every corner seemed to echo with purpose. The sign above the main entrance was covered with a long white sheet that read, "The Open Door Project, a home for every voice." Mr. Everett walked through the lobby that morning with a folder of blueprints in his hand. He stopped every few steps to greet workers, check on the renovations, and offer thanks to the people helping him rebuild. He still wore his usual dark suit, but his shoulders looked lighter now, as if a great weight had lifted. At the end of the hallway, he found Amira sitting near the main doors, her wheelchair parked in a patch of sunlight. She had a small radio on her lap, quietly playing one of her mother's old recordings. The soft, soulful melody filled the space like the memory of light after a storm. "Good morning, Amira," he said, his voice warm. She turned down the volume and smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Everett. You look happy today." "I am," he said. "Everything is coming together faster than I expected." He looked at her radio. "Is that your mother's voice?" "Yes," she said, touching the radio gently. "I found an old tape in her box of things. It sounds like she recorded it just for me." He listened quietly for a moment. The woman's voice was strong and smooth, carrying both strength and tenderness. "Your mother had a gift," he said. "But you already know that." Amira nodded. "She used to tell me that every song is a door. You just have to be brave enough to open it." He smiled faintly. "And here you are, opening all the doors she never could." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while. Then Amira asked, "When the renovations are done, will the theater still look the same?" "It will look different," he said honestly, "but it will feel the same. The heart of the place will stay." She thought for a moment, then said softly, "That is good. Because hearts are what make places alive." Mr. Everett nodded, moved by her words. You always find the truest way to say things. Just then, one of the workers approached. Sir, we need your approval for the new stage ramp design. Mr. Everett took the plans and reviewed them, then crouched beside Amira so she could see. What do you think? He asked. The ramp will connect straight to the center of the stage, not the side. That way, no one ever has to enter from the shadows again. Oh, her eyes widened. It is perfect, she said. It means everyone belongs in the light. He smiled and signed the papers. Then, it is decided. As the day went on, the theater buzzed with energy. Reporters stopped by to take photographs, capturing the transformation in progress. Children from the community center visited to help paint murals in the side hallways. Bright images of stars, flowers, and musical notes that wound up the walls like vines. When lunchtime came, Mr. W.W. Everett brought sandwiches for the workers and Amira. They ate together near the stage steps, sharing stories about music, about dreams, and about how kindness could outlast any building. At one point, Amira looked at him thoughtfully and said, "Do you think my mother would like all of this?" He paused before answering. "I do not just think she would like it, Amira. I think she would be proud. She believed that art could heal the world, and now her song is doing exactly that through you." Her eyes shimmered, and she said softly, "Then maybe she never left." He looked toward the stage, where sunlight spilled across the empty floor. "Maybe she did not," he said. By late afternoon, the construction crew packed up for the day. The theater grew quiet again, filled only with the soft rustle of wind through the open doors. Amira wheeled herself to the center of the stage, resting her hands on the piano. "Mr. Everett," she said after a long silence, "do you think I could teach the children here when everything is finished?" He looked up, surprised. "You want to teach here?" She nodded. "Music helped me feel brave when everything else felt too big. I think maybe it can do the same for them." He smiled slowly, his expression tender. "Then it will be your stage as much as anyone's." That evening, as the sun sank low and turned the city gold, the two of them stood together at the entrance, watching the last rays of light fall across the theater floor. Amira held her mother's notebook open in her lap. "I was reading one of her last pages," she said softly. She wrote, "The song ends only when no one remembers it." He looked down at her. "Then her song will never end." Amira smiled, the corners of her eyes glistening. "Not as long as we keep singing." They stood in silence as the city lights flickered on one by one. The workers had gone, the dust had settled, and yet the theater seemed alive, breathing, waiting, listening. Mr. Everett turned to her and said, "Tomorrow, I will hang a plaque in the lobby. It will have your mother's name on it, right beside yours. The Grand Meridian belongs to both of you now." Amira's voice trembled. "To both of us?" He nodded. "Yes, because you are the reason this place has found its heart again." She looked up at the ceiling, where faint stars shimmered through the glass skylight. "Then I think she is smiling right now," she said. Mr. Everett followed her gaze and whispered, "I think she always was." And as the doors of the Grand Meridian slowly closed for the night, the sound of her mother's voice still played faintly from the small radio on Amira's lap, singing the same melody that had once been lost, now alive again, echoing into forever. The next morning, a light rain fell over the city, soft and steady like the rhythm of a quiet song. The raindrops slid down the tall windows of the Grand Meridian Theater, tracing silver lines across the glass. Inside, the scent of fresh paint still lingered, mixed with the warmth of coffee brewing in the staff lounge. The renovations were nearly complete. The floors shone, the curtains were newly pressed, and the golden letters above the stage now read, "The Open Door Project." Mr. Everett stood near the back of the hall, umbrella in hand, listening to the sound of rain tapping the roof. The place felt new, alive. Yet under that feeling of renewal, there was something deeper, a peace he had not known in years. He turned when he heard the familiar sound of Amira's wheelchair rolling across the floor. She was wearing a soft red sweater and her favorite blue scarf, now tucked under her chin to keep warm. Her mother's notebook was once again on her lap. "Good morning, Mr. Everett," she said cheerfully. "Good morning, Amira," he replied. "You are here early again." She smiled. "I wanted to see how the new stage ramp looked in the morning light." He gestured toward the front. "Then come see." It is waiting for you." They walked together toward the stage. The ramp gleamed under the spotlights, smooth, steady, and strong. Amira touched the railing with her fingertips, then looked up at him with wide, shining eyes. "It is beautiful," she said. "It feels like a promise." Mr. Everett nodded. "That is exactly what it is." She turned her chair and looked out over the empty seats. The sound of the rain outside blended with the faint hum of the building. "It almost sounds like applause," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Maybe the sky is clapping for you." Amira laughed softly. "Maybe for both of us." They sat in silence for a while, watching the rain shimmer against the tall windows. Then Amira said, "I wrote something last night." "Oh, another song?" he asked. "Yes," she said, holding out a folded piece of paper. "But this one is different. It is not about my mother. It is about now." He took the paper carefully and read it. The words were simple, but they carried the same kind of honesty that always lived in her voice. "There is a door that used to be closed. Now it is open. I do not need to knock anymore. The light that was once behind it is now on my face. I am not small here. I am home." Ovno. When he finished reading, his throat tightened. He handed the paper back to her gently. "Amira," he said quietly, "this belongs on the wall of the theater." She shook her head quickly. "No, it is not for walls. It is for people to hear." "Then we will make sure they do," he said. That afternoon, the staff gathered for a small private meeting to discuss the official reopening of the theater. Reporters were already asking questions, and local schools had expressed interest in sending children to visit. Mr. Everett stood at the head of the table, explaining the vision behind the Open Door project, while Amira sat beside him, listening intently. When he finished, one of the stage managers raised a hand. "Mr. Everett," she said, "the grand reopening should have a performance, something that represents what this new chapter means." He looked toward Amira, his eyes thoughtful. "I think we already know who should perform." Amira blinked in surprise. "Me?" "Yes," he said. "Your song, the one you just wrote it, is exactly what this moment is about." Her hands fidgeted in her lap. "But this time it will not be just you and the staff. There will be so many people." He smiled softly. "Then they will finally hear what truth sounds like." Amira hesitated, her small face reflecting a mix of fear and wonder. "What if I forget the words?" "Then you will remember the feeling," he said gently. "And that will be enough." The room filled with approving murmurs, and by the end of the meeting, the plan was set. The reopening would take place in 1 week. The first song to be performed on the new stage would be Amira's. As the week passed, excitement grew. Invitations went out across the city to musicians, teachers, families, and children from the community center. The newspapers began to talk about the event as a rebirth of art through compassion. Each day after school hours, Amira practiced at the piano, while Mr. Everett listened quietly from the first row. Sometimes she would stop mid-song, tilt her head, and say, "I think this part should sound like hope." Other times, she would add a line from her mother's lyrics, blending past and present until the song felt complete. On the night before the performance, the theater was silent. Only 2 figures remained inside, an old man and a young girl sitting under the soft glow of the chandelier. "Do you think she will be proud of me?" Amira asked suddenly. Mr. Everett looked at her for a long moment before answering. "She already is," he said. "You have turned her courage into something the world can touch." Amira smiled, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I am not scared anymore." He nodded. "That is what music does. It teaches us how to be brave." Oh. As they prepared to leave, Amira wheeled herself to the center of the stage one last time. The rain had stopped outside, and moonlight poured through the glass windows. She looked up, her face bathed in silver light, and whispered, "Tomorrow, she will hear me again." Mr. Everett stood behind her, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Tomorrow, everyone will." The theater doors closed softly behind them as they left, but the sound of her mother's melody seemed to follow them out into the quiet street. It mingled with the wind, with the heartbeat of the city, carrying forward a promise made long ago that no song born from love ever truly fades. The morning of the reopening arrived dressed in sunlight. The sky above the Grand Meridian Theater was a bright blue, clean after a week of spring rain. Workers were finishing the last details, polishing the brass door handles, sweeping the marble floors, arranging flowers near the entrance. The large banner stretched across the front, read, "The Open Door Project, a New Beginning." Mr. Everett stood by the main doors, his dark suit pressed, his silver hair neatly combed back. But it was not pride that filled his chest, it was gratitude. He had seen this theater through decades of shows, fame, and emptiness, but never had it felt so alive as it did today. Inside, Amira was waiting. She sat at the piano on the center stage, her hands resting quietly on the keys. Her blue scarf shimmered under the warm glow of the chandelier, and her mother's notebook lay open beside her. The words she had written, "I am not small here, I am home," gleamed softly under the light. When Mr. Everett entered the hall, she turned to him with a nervous smile. "It feels like the first time all over again," she said. He nodded. "It should. First times are how we know something matters." She laughed softly. "Then this must matter a lot." "It does," he said. "More than you know." The staff gathered in the lobby, greeting guests as they arrived. Families from the community center filled the first few rows. Dancers, musicians, and former performers who once worked under Mr. Everett's direction returned to see what had become of the place they remembered. Even the mayor had come, sitting quietly near the back, his hands folded in respect. As the clock struck 6 in the evening, the house lights dimmed. A gentle hush spread across the audience. Mr. Everett walked slowly onto the stage, his footsteps echoing against the wooden floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm but resonant. "For years, this building has been a theater of performance. But tonight, it becomes something else, a place of belonging. The Open Door Project is not just about art. It is about remembering that every voice matters, no matter how small, no matter how different." He turned toward Amira, who waited beside the piano. "And it is only right that the first song of this new beginning should come from the person who reminded us of that truth. Please welcome, with all your hearts, Amira Monroe." Applause filled the hall. It was not loud or wild, it was warm, like a collective heartbeat. Amira rolled forward to the center of the stage, her small hands trembling just slightly. She looked out at the sea of faces, the glow of the lights, and the shadowy balconies above. Somewhere up there, she imagined her mother sitting quietly, smiling. She took a breath, placed her hands on the piano, and began to play. The first notes were soft, steady, like footsteps on a familiar path. Her voice followed, clear and pure, filling the room with the same sincerity that had once silenced the theater during rehearsal. But this time, the song was hers, born from her words, from her courage, from the love she carried in her heart. There was a door that once was closed. Now it is open wide. The light that waited on the other side now shines on me tonight. Each verse grew stronger, and by the time she reached the final chorus, the orchestra joined in softly behind her. The violins rose like wings, lifting her melody higher. The sound was not grand or showy, it was human, real, full of warmth. Tears glistened in Mr. Everett's eyes as he watched from the side. He could see her mother in her posture, her determination, her grace. He whispered under his breath, "She did it, Lila. She truly did it." When the song ended, a deep silence filled the hall. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the applause began soft at first, then rising into a standing ovation. People clapped not for perfection, but for truth. Amira bowed her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for listening." As the applause continued, Mr. Everett walked onto the stage and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "Amira," he said, "your song has given this place back its soul." She smiled up at him through tears. "I think my mother gave it back. I just reminded it to sing." The audience laughed gently, clapping again. Mr. Everett turned toward them and said, "Then let us keep it singing." After the event, as guests mingled in the lobby and the lights dimmed to a golden glow, Mr. Everett and Amira sat together on the front steps of the theater. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of rain-soaked pavement and blooming flowers. "She would have loved this night," Amira said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "She would have loved seeing you lead it." Amira looked up at the stars beginning to appear above the city. "Do you think she is proud?" He nodded. "She always was." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Then I think I am proud too." He looked at her, his voice soft but steady. "You have every right to be. You did something extraordinary tonight. You opened every door that was ever closed." For a moment, they simply sat in silence, the lights of the city flickering around them like scattered constellations. Then Amira said, "Mr. Everett, can I tell you something?" "Of course," he said. "I think this place is not just a theater anymore," she said. "It is a heart." He smiled gently. "Then let us promise to keep it beating." They sat there as the last guest drifted away, and the night settled around them. The theater behind them glowed softly through the glass doors, and somewhere inside, the echo of her song still lingered soft, eternal, and alive. For the first time, both of them felt that the story was no longer about what had been lost, but about everything that had been found. And in that quiet moment, under a sky full of stars, the Grand Meridian truly became what it was always meant to be, a place where kindness, truth, and second chances could live forever. The next morning dawned soft and golden, the kind of morning that felt like a quiet reward after a long storm. The city outside the Grand Meridian Theater stirred awake slowly, the streets still damp from the night's rain. Inside, the building stood bathed in sunlight, its polished floors gleaming, the scent of fresh lilies drifting through the lobby. The theater had not only reopened, it had been reborn. Amira arrived early, her wheelchair gliding gently across the marble. Her blue scarf fluttered behind her like a small banner of victory. She paused in the center of the lobby, where the morning light poured through the glass ceiling. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the floor, and for a moment, she thought of her mother. "We did it," she whispered softly. "You can rest now." Mr. Everett appeared at the top of the grand staircase, smiling when he saw her. "You are here even before the staff," he said. "I wanted to feel the quiet," Amira replied. "It sounds different now." "Oh," he descended the stairs slowly, his polished shoes tapping against the steps. "That is because the building is breathing again," he said. "It has been waiting for this peace for a long time." They walked together toward the main hall. Workers were already setting up chairs for the next community event. The new ramp shimmered under the lights, strong and smooth, leading directly to the center of the stage. Amira ran her hand along the railing. "It feels like freedom," she said. "It is, Mr. Everett answered. "The kind of freedom that comes from doing what is right." As they stood there, the sound of laughter echoed through the hallway. The children from the community center were arriving for rehearsal. Their faces lit up when they saw Amira. "Miss Amira," one of the younger girls called. "Can we sing your song again today?" Amira smiled. "Of course you can," she said. "But this time you all get to start it." The children cheered and hurried toward the piano, their voices bright and eager. Mr. Everett watched from a distance, his eyes glistening. To him, it was as if the theater itself was healing each laugh, each note, each moment, filling the cracks of the past. Later that morning, while the children practiced, a visitor entered the lobby. She was an older woman dressed in a dark coat, holding a faded envelope. Her eyes scanned the walls with curiosity before resting on the bronze plaque newly mounted near the entrance. The plaque read, "In honor of Lila Monroe and her daughter Amira, whose song reopened every door." The woman smiled, tears forming in her eyes. She turned as Mr. Everett approached. "Excuse me," she said softly. "You must be Mr. Everett." He nodded politely. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" "I was a friend of Lila's," the woman said. "We sang together years ago, before she joined this theater. I heard what you did in her name. I wanted to thank you." Mr. Everett's expression softened. "You do not need to thank me. She was the one who gave this place its soul. I am only trying to honor that." The woman's gaze drifted toward the sound of music coming from the main hall. "Is that her daughter?" He smiled. "Yes. That is Amira." The woman nodded, her voice trembling slightly. "She sounds just like her mother." When the rehearsal ended, Amira rolled into the lobby, her cheeks flushed with joy. Mr. Everett introduced her to the visitor, and the woman knelt down beside her. "Your mother was one of the kindest people I ever met," she said. "She used to say that every song she sang was really a prayer for someone else." Amira's eyes shone. "Then maybe that is why her song still works," she said. It is still helping people." The woman smiled through her tears. "Yes, child, it truly is." After she left, the theater settled into its afternoon rhythm. The sun rose higher, casting shifting patterns of light across the stage. Amira practiced quietly at the piano while Mr. Everett worked on his office paperwork nearby. The sound of her playing drifted through the open door, a gentle reminder of how far they had come. When she finished, she looked up and said, "Mr. Everett, do you ever miss performing?" He looked up from his desk, surprised by the question. "I was never a performer," he said. "I was always behind the curtain." "Then maybe now you can step into the light," she said with a smile. He laughed softly. "I think I will leave that to you." Amira tilted her head. "Maybe not. Maybe the theater needs both of us, one to sing and one to listen." He thought for a moment, then nodded. "That sounds like a perfect duet." As the day drew to a close, the golden light of evening began to fill the theater again. The last of the children waved goodbye as they left, promising to return the next morning. Amira stayed behind, her mother's notebook open on her lap. "There is one page left," she said quietly. Mr. Everett looked up. "One page?" She nodded. "It is blank. I think she left it for me." He smiled softly. "Then what will you write?" Amira picked up a pencil and thought for a long moment before writing carefully across the page. "The door is open," the song continues. Wah! When she finished, she looked up and said, "Now it feels complete." He nodded slowly. "It does." Outside, the first stars began to appear. The lights of the Grand Meridian Theater glowed softly through the windows, warm and steady against the night. Mr. Everett and Amira stood side by side in the quiet hall, watching the reflections shimmer on the marble floor. There was no applause this time, no audience, just the simple truth of what they had built together. For the first time, the theater did not feel like a monument to the past. It felt like a promise to the future. And in that promise, under the faint sound of the city's heartbeat, a little girl and an old man found what they had both been searching for: not fame, not redemption, but peace. The next few weeks brought warmth, light, and a quiet sense of rhythm to the Grand Meridian Theater. Every morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows like melted gold, touching the new ramp, the polished piano, and the bronze plaque that carried Lila and Amira's names. The theater had once been a place of applause and ambition. Now, it was something gentler, a place of belonging. Each day began with the same comforting sounds: the soft roll of Amira's wheelchair along the marble floor, the distant echo of Mr. Everett's footsteps, the laughter of the children arriving for their lessons. The air always carried the faint hum of piano notes, as if the building itself had learned to breathe through music. Amira had quickly become the heart of the Open Door Project. She taught the children to listen to the world, to hear music in footsteps, in laughter, even in silence. Her lessons were less about perfection and more about feeling. "If you can feel it," she told them, "you can sing it." One morning, as the children were gathering their instruments, Mr. Everett stood near the entrance, speaking to a group of visitors from a local newspaper. They were writing a story about the theater's transformation. One of them, a young reporter, asked, "Mr. Everett, how did all this begin?" He smiled and looked toward the stage, where Amira sat surrounded by her small students. "It began with one act of kindness," he said softly, "and one little girl who refused to let her mother's song fade." The reporter nodded, her eyes misty as she watched the scene unfold. Amira was helping a boy adjust his violin. She leaned close, whispered something that made him laugh, and then clapped when he played his first clear note. It was such a simple image, yet it carried more power than any performance ever could. When the class ended, the children left in pairs, their laughter echoing through the lobby. Amira stayed behind to tidy up the music sheets. Mr. Everett walked toward her with 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Your class grows larger every week," he said, handing her a cup. She smiled. "Music spreads fast when it is free." He nodded thoughtfully. "So does kindness." They sat in the front row together, sipping their drinks as the stage lights dimmed slowly above them. For a while, neither spoke. The quiet between them was soft and peaceful, like the final note of a song. Then Amira broke the silence. "Mr. Everett, can I ask you something?" "Of course," he said. She looked down at her cup, her voice low but steady. Why did you choose to call it the Open Door Project instead of just fixing the theater's name? He thought for a moment before answering. Because this is more than a theater now, he said. It is a promise. An open door is not just for walking through, it is for welcoming others. It reminds us that the only walls worth keeping are the ones that hold us together. Amira nodded slowly. Then I think my mother would like that. I know she would, he said gently. Outside, the afternoon sun shifted toward evening, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The theater lights flickered on, bathing the hall in soft gold. It was in that golden light that Mr. Everett noticed something small and shining beside Amira's chair, a silver charm, shaped like a music note, that had fallen from her bracelet. He bent down and picked it up. You dropped this, he said. Amira took it carefully, her smile quiet but full of meaning. It is from my mother's bracelet. I think it broke last night. He hesitated, then said softly, Maybe it did not break. Maybe it wanted to stay here. Amira turned the charm in her palm, watching how it caught the light. Then it belongs here, she said, placing it gently on the edge of the piano. It can listen with us. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Amira and Mr. Everett stayed behind to close the theater. They walked together through the silent lobby, checking the lights and locking the doors. When they reached the main entrance, Amira stopped and looked back at the hall behind them. Do you ever think about what it was like before? She asked. He followed her gaze, his expression soft. Every day, he said, and every day, I am grateful that it is not that way anymore. She nodded. It feels like we changed something bigger than just a building. He smiled. We did. We changed the way people see. Amira turned her wheelchair to face him fully. Then maybe that is what my mother meant when she said songs could heal. He leaned down slightly, his voice low. Amira, your mother believed that music could reach where words could not, but you proved it. Her eyes shimmered in the dim light. Do you think she knows? Yes, he said firmly. I think she always knew. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The night outside was calm, and through the glass doors, the city lights blinked like tiny stars. Amira took one last look at the stage, now dark and still. Good night, she whispered not to the theater, but to the memory it carried. Mr. Everett opened the door for her, and together they stepped out into the cool evening air. The street was quiet, the world wrapped in a soft hum of peace. Before they parted ways, he said, Tomorrow we start preparing for the next concert. The children will need you early. She smiled, her scarf fluttering in the breeze. Then I will be here before sunrise. He chuckled. Of course you will. As he watched her roll down the sidewalk, her small figure glowing under the streetlights, he realized something profound. Redemption did not arrive in thunder or applause. It came quietly in the steady rhythm of kindness, in the voice of a child, in a theater that had finally remembered how to listen. Inside, the single charm on the piano caught the faint light from the street and shimmered. It looked almost alive, as though the music it represented was still being written note by note, day by day, in the hearts of everyone who had learned, through one little girl, that no door should ever stay closed. The next morning, the city awoke beneath a pale sky brushed with pink. The air smelled of new beginnings, of rain-washed streets and blooming jasmine. The Grand Meridian Theater stood proud and gleaming, its tall glass doors reflecting the early light. Inside, the silence was full, not empty like before, but rich with the hum of purpose, as if the building itself remembered what it was made for. Amira arrived before the sun was fully up. She wore her mother's silver bracelet, now missing one charm, and a scarf the color of morning clouds. Her wheelchair rolled softly across the marble, the sound echoing gently through the lobby. When she reached the piano, she paused, touching the single silver charm that still rested on its edge. It glowed faintly in the early light. Good morning, she whispered, as if speaking to someone unseen. Moments later, Mr. Everett entered, his coat draped over one arm and a stack of envelopes in his hand. He smiled when he saw her. You beat me here again, he said. Amira looked up, grinning. You walk too slow. He laughed quietly. Or maybe you move too fast. They shared a small smile, the kind that comes only between people who understand each other without needing to say much. "I have news," he said, holding up the envelopes. "The city's cultural council has approved a grant for the Open Door project. We will be able to offer music lessons to children across the neighborhood free of charge." Amira's eyes widened. "Really? That means more children can come." He nodded, his voice softening. "Yes, your mother's dream will reach farther than either of us ever imagined." Amira placed her hands together, her excitement shining. "Then we have to make sure the first class is special." He raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" She looked around the stage, thoughtful. "Something small, something honest. Maybe not just music, but stories too. Everyone has a song, but sometimes it begins with words." He smiled, moved by her wisdom. "You are becoming quite the teacher." I am just doing what my mother did," she said simply. She listened first. The morning passed quickly. Workers arrived to check the lighting, and the janitor polished the railings until they gleamed. The scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the small cafe near the side entrance. By mid-morning, the children began to arrive, their voices filling the air like birdsong. Some carried small instruments. Others brought nothing but curiosity. Amira gathered them around the piano. "Today," she said, "we are not just going to play music. We are going to tell a story with sound. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to be true." One little boy raised his hand. "Can I tell a story about my dad?" Amira nodded. "Of course you can." Another girl whispered, "Can I play my story on the drums instead of saying it?" Amira smiled. "That is exactly what music is for." As the children began, Mr. Everett stood at the back, listening. Their songs were simple, some clumsy, some raw, but they filled the hall with something no orchestra could create: truth. He felt his chest tighten, realizing that this messy, beautiful sound was what art was always meant to be. Later, when the class ended, Amira rolled to where he stood. "Did you hear them?" she asked. "I did," he said softly. "And I think your mother did too." She smiled, her eyes shining. "Then she must be happy." He nodded. "Yes, I believe she is." "No." That afternoon, the theater was quieter. The children had gone, leaving behind laughter and faint footprints of joy. Amira stayed by the piano, flipping through her mother's notebook. One page caught her attention, a page she had not noticed before. The writing was faint, but still readable. "If ever my song finds another voice, let it guide them not toward the stage, but toward the world." The stage ends at the curtain. The song should not. Amira traced the words with her fingertips. "Toward the world," she whispered. "Maybe that is what comes next." When Mr. Everett returned to the stage, she showed him the note. He read it slowly, his expression softening. "Your mother never stopped teaching, even through her silence," he said. "Then maybe we should listen," Amira said. "Maybe the song needs to leave the theater now." He looked at her, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I mean we could bring music outside," she said. "To the parks, to the streets, to the places where people do not think they belong here. That is what the Open Door project should really mean." Mr. Everett leaned on the piano, thinking, "That might be the best idea anyone has ever shared in this building." "Then, let us do it," she said, smiling. By evening, they had already begun planning. Flyers were printed, volunteers called, and the idea took shape. The Open Door project would hold open-air performances, free concerts where anyone could sing, speak, or play. It would not matter if they were trained, famous, or completely unknown. What mattered was the courage to share. When the plans were set, Mr. Everett turned to Amira and said quietly, "You know, you have changed more than just this theater." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "You have changed me," he said simply. "You taught me that the best stories do not end with applause, they end with understanding." Amira looked down, shy but smiling. "Then I think we are both learning the same lesson." That night, after everyone had gone, Amira rolled to the piano one last time. The silver charm gleamed beside the keys. She pressed a single note, letting it linger in the air before whispering, "We are taking the song outside now, Mama." "Okay." The note faded into the quiet, but the air around her seemed to hum, alive and listening. She smiled, closed her mother's notebook gently, and turned toward the door. Outside, the city lights blinked like stars fallen to the streets. The Grand Meridian Theater stood behind her, no longer just a place of walls and ceilings, but a living heart, ready to share its music with the world beyond its doors. The first outdoor concert of the Open Door Project took place on a warm Saturday afternoon. The park across from the Grand Meridian Theater buzzed with excitement. Families brought picnic blankets. Children chased bubbles through the grass. And a small stage had been built beneath the tallest oak tree. It was simple, just wooden planks, a microphone, and a piano, but it felt like magic waiting to happen. Amira sat near the stage, her blue scarf fluttering in the gentle wind. Her mother's bracelet caught the sunlight, the silver charms glowing softly. Mr. Everett stood beside her, his sleeves rolled up, directing volunteers and greeting guests with a warm smile. He had not looked this alive in years. "Are you ready?" he asked, glancing at her. Amira nodded, her eyes bright. "I think she would love this," she said softly. He smiled. "I know she would." When the music began, it was not loud or grand. It started with one of the children, a boy with a violin that was slightly out of tune. His notes trembled, but the audience leaned in to listen. Then another child joined, strumming a guitar, and another tapped softly on a drum. The rhythm grew, filling the park with a sound that was raw, imperfect, and beautiful. Amira wheeled herself closer to the stage. When it was her turn, the crowd grew quiet. The sunlight touched her face, and for a moment, she looked like the memory of her mother made flesh strong, gentle, and full of light. "This song," she said, "is for everyone who ever felt like the door was closed." "Oh." Her voice rose steady and clear over the sound of the wind. She sang not as a performer, but as someone giving something back to the world. Her song spoke of forgiveness, of courage, of finding home in unexpected places. Each note carried warmth, weaving through the laughter of children, through the rustle of trees, through the hearts of everyone listening. Mr. Everett watched from the side, his throat tight with emotion. He saw people holding hands, some wiping tears, others simply smiling. Around him, the world felt still as if, for one brief moment, everything wrong had been made right through the voice of one little girl. When the final note faded, there was silence, then applause, long, rising, endless. Amira looked down, her eyes wet, her heart full. She whispered, "Thank you, Mama." Mr. Everett stepped onto the stage and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Amira," he said softly, "you did not just open a door today, you opened hearts." "Oh." She looked up at him, smiling through her tears. "Then we will keep them open." As the crowd began to sing along to the melody she had written, the park glowed with golden light. And there, under the wide sky, the dream of one woman and the courage of one small girl became one truth. The music had finally left the theater and found the world. As the sun began to set, the last notes of Amira's song lingered in the warm air like a blessing. The park was bathed in soft gold, the kind of light that makes everything feel gentle and endless. The laughter of children mixed with the rustle of leaves, and the glow from the Grand Meridian Theater across the street shimmered like a quiet witness to what had just happened. Amira sat at the edge of the small stage, her hands folded in her lap, her blue scarf drifting in the evening breeze. Her mother's bracelet gleamed faintly in the fading light. Around her, people still talked and smiled, their faces open and peaceful. Music had done something words could not. It had gathered them. Mr. Everett approached slowly, his footsteps soft against the grass. He looked tired, but it was the kind of tired that comes after joy. "You did it," he said quietly. Amira turned toward him, smiling. "We did it," she replied. He nodded, his eyes glistening. "Your mother's dream lives on not just in this theater or this park, but in every person who heard your song today." Amira looked out toward the crowd, packing up their instruments, families waving goodbye, children humming her melody as they walked home. "Then I think the song found its home," she said softly. He followed her gaze. "It did, and it will keep finding new ones." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the city settling into evening. The air was cool now, and the first stars began to appear above the rooftops. The park lights flickered on, wrapping everything in a soft glow. Amira broke the silence first. "Mr. Everett, can I tell you something?" "Of course," he said. "When I first came to the theater, I thought I was too small to change anything," she said. I just wanted to sing my mother's song. But now I think, maybe every song changes something, even if it is small." He smiled, his voice gentle. "That is the truth, Amira. You changed more than a theater. You changed hearts, including mine." Her eyes shimmered with quiet pride. "Then maybe that is what kindness is, a song that never ends." Mr. Everett looked toward the theater, its doors still open, its windows glowing like lanterns. "Yes," he said. "And because of you, that song will keep playing long after we are gone." Amira reached for her mother's bracelet, tracing the missing charm with her thumb. "Maybe she can hear it," she whispered. He placed a hand over hers. "I am certain she can." The city around them softened into twilight, the world slowing down. Across the street, the Grand Meridian Theater stood tall and alive, its open doors shining like the heart of something that had learned to love again. Amira looked up at the sky, smiling. "The door is open," she said softly. "And the song continues." Mr. Everett finished. They sat together under the fading light, two souls joined by music, by forgiveness, and by the quiet truth that what begins in pain can end in grace. The last light of the day touched the stage, and in that golden moment, the promise that started with one voice found its forever home.